Let's get started. Welcome everyone to another edition of VQMS. Today we're going to have Dante is talking to us about social media. Um, as usual, we have officially we have 1 hour for the presentation, roughly 45 minutes for the talk, 15 minutes for questions. Panelists can feel free to just unmute themselves and ask questions whenever they want. The audience can put questions into the Q&A box, and I will moderate the questions and relay them to Dante. All right, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks so much to the entire team that organized this seminar for having me present our work. I'm going to present joint work with Lina at the University of Illinois about social media comments and their effects on users' behavior, both online on the platform as well as offline. Okay. So in 2025, more than 70% of the US population has at least one social media account. And social media has often been described as a public square, a space for these people, for users to exchange opinions and interact right online, exchange information. Now, one tool, one feature that enables users to do so is the comment sections below social media posts, right? So while comment sections allow this type of horizontal communications between peers in social media, they're also often reflective of a vocal minority of people whose opinions are normally very polarized. And now, because social media comments are publicly visible, right? Everybody can see them most of the times. Then they have a potential to affect how users that see the post, how they think the post, right? So how their opinions about the content of the post, right? And also have their effects on their behavior while they're on social media. So in this paper, we want to study this question. And in particular, first, we want to understand, how many people look at social media comments, right? So why should we look at comment sections on social media? And so we asked a survey of about 5,000 US adults, and we found out that more than 80% reported that sometimes and often or very often they read comments on social media. So comments, are widely read. Okay, so people pay attention to them, and maybe they do so. We do so because comments, on the one hand, they create a value, right? So we can think of comments as standard user-generated content, reviews, right, that facilitate feedback, discussion, word of mouth promotion among users. But on the other hand, I think we think that comments might also carry some risks. So on the one hand, right, if you have read comment sections, you might see that they contain the opinions of vocal few, and these opinions often diverge. They might contain toxic comments, and these kind of interactions might disrupt discourse and also shape public opinion. For brands, this also has important concern regarding the brand safety, brand equity, right, when they do advertising campaigns. So if we find that comments shape users' actions, users' beliefs, then their comments might be important and might matter. And therefore, right, users, creators, brands might be affected by comments and by their content. Okay. So we study in this paper two questions. Okay. First of all, how does the presence as well as the stance of comment sections online on social media affect on-platform user engagement with the post, okay, with the content that is promoted? The second question is, how does this presence and stance of comments affect beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors of people when they're off the platform? Okay, so think about you reach a website of an organization. So what happens once you are on the website? Okay. So to study these two questions, we rely on two complementary experiments. The first one is an organic social media feed experiments conducted on Facebook that we did in partnership with one of the largest online racial justice organizations in the US. Okay, so the topic that I will discuss is going to be related to racial justice. Okay, so it's not standard commercial setting. We study racial justice and racial attitudes. So with this social media feed experiment, we try to answer the question, how does the comment sections affect on-platform user engagement? Then when we want to study off-platform beliefs, attitudes, and behavior, we rely on a complementary survey experiment where we recruited people from Prolific and we embedded the experiment into Qualtrics that allows us to study more specific, more exactly what users think when they see these comments and how they act. For example, what they would donate, right? And what they think about other people. So overall, our evidence will have implications for comment moderation or more generally content moderations on social media, and therefore will be important for both advertisers, so the brand side, for platforms, right? Because they might think of how they need to start thinking how, what kind of tools to give to brands for moderate comments, as well as to regulators more generally. So as an overview or a preview of what we find, I can, the slides show that this slide tells you that, first of all, we find that comments on these progressive posts, racial justice posts, they tend to be dominated by opposing voices. Okay, and I'll be more specific later about this. And then when we look at the causal effects of these comments, we find that the presence of comments as well as their stance does shape on-platform engagement. And in particular, we find that the presence of comments increase interactions and clicks on the post, but these effects are mostly driven by the opposing voices. So those voices that go against the message that the organization is trying to spread. Okay? And we find that these effects are stronger when for men and for people in conservative areas. Then we take the same setting of the platform, and there we find that these opposing comments, so the same opposing comments that affect on-platform engagement positively, they actually affect attitudes and behavior in away from the message of the organization. We also find that they reduce incentivized donation to the organization. Okay, so basically in this paper, right, if you combine these pieces of evidence, we document a tension that exists between on-platform engagement and off-platform influence. Okay. All right, so I'm going to dive into the specific of the setting and then how we built these two studies. Okay. So as I already mentioned, we are going to discuss topics related to just racial justice. Okay. We're going to look at comment sections below social media posts from organizations, NGOs. You can also think of news outlets. And for this specific setting, right, you can think of the comment sections as digital public squares that enables discussion on polarizing issues, on divisive issues. Okay. And therefore, right, so because of that, right, these comments normally expose people to viewpoints that normally they might also disagree with. Okay. So to study this context, we partnered with Color of Change, which is the leading racial justice online racial justice organization, as well as civil rights advocacy in the US. And with them, we identified 5 key issues that we decided together, right, jointly, to include in the study. I'll give you an overview of this issue in one slide. Now, I just want to reemphasize that, again, this is a topic where there's a lot of divisiveness in the US, right? So racial attitudes are highly divided. When you ask the questions whether white people benefit from advantages in society that black people do not have, 80% of Democrats says they think this way, while only 22% of Republicans think that this is true. Okay, so it's a divisive issue. So we selected 5 topics with the organization. These 5 topics are the following: we have voting rights, criminal justice, access to fair education, environmental justice, as well as data and tech bias. Okay? So, within each of these posts, which we designed with professional graphic designers, they were pre-tested, they were also approved by the branding team of the organization, right? The message that comes out normally, right? Also, if you can read the headline of this post, is that, these are issues that are pervasive in society, but normally, right, what happens is that Black communities tend to face or to, have to face higher costs compared to non-Black communities, okay, for each of these issues. So the goal here for the organization for Color of Change was, it's a full funnel goal, right? So multi-step goal. From the top of the funnel, sometimes they just want to raise awareness, okay, that these are issues that Black people face. But at the same time, they also, move people, down through the funnel. So they want to try to engage with them. They want to try to make sure that they sign up for newsletters. And eventually, right at the very bottom of the funnel, they want to convert. And in this case, conversion means raise donations, okay, that would allow the organization to do the advocacy. Okay. So these are the posts that we study. Now, the first thing we want to do, okay, is we want to collect real comments on this post. Okay. So the first step that I'll show you, that the first evidence I'll show you is purely descriptive. I will not, spend too much time on that. Also because again, it's going to be, purely descriptive. There is nothing causal to get from there. But I think it's interesting to see how people in different areas of the U.S., specifically with different in areas with different ideology composition, engage with this type of content. Then, once we have collected real comments or comments from real people, we do manipulate the comment sections below this social media post, and using platform features, we'll conduct a randomized experiment where we randomize the comment sections that users are exposed to. And we do that directly on Facebook using A/B testing tools, along with some, augmenting features that we need to provide causal evidence. So this basically step 3 is the step where we provide evidence of how the comment sections and their stance affect online engagement on the platform. Then we have a final step where we take the same comments off the platform, and we are going to study that through survey participants from Prolific, which will allow us to provide causal evidence on the impact of these comments from real users on attitudes as well as high-stake behavior of the platform. Okay? So for step 1, we want to collect
Sorry,
comments from real
Dante,
users. Yes.
can I ask a question about the kind of the overview here? So you look at just one one perspective of the organization, right? And I understand that it can be very hard to find an organization to collaborate with to run an experiment. I'm very sympathetic to that. But for example, I don't know if you have tried to reach out to other types of organizations for the, for step 1 and 2. But for 4, for example, you can definitely find campaigns on Facebook and hide or reveal the comments to get a better, representative set of findings rather than just how people respond to this specific type of campaign, right?
Yeah, so totally. So just to make sure I interpret the question correctly, you're saying, so what we study now, and it's true, right? That we study content that comes from a progressive side, right? That tries to persuade people towards being on that progressive side, totally,
Hmm.
right? So we are studying that side, which we did that because we found an organization. Also, grant money is kind of attached that to that setting, but that does not mean that we couldn't study the opposite. And actually, I think at some point we want to go there. Now, study the opposite again. I think you pointed correctly. So one, two, three might be a little bit tricky. Maybe one is doable. Two and three is a bit tricky because it's on platform. So we really need a strong or yeah, a partner for doing that. But four is actually true. So we could study four on the on prolific with prolific and. Yeah, I think for now we haven't done it. Lena and I actually are thinking of doing that. So this is a good point. Yeah, totally. But I think more generally, what I show you, I think is flexible enough so that we can do that. Okay. So the methodology that I show you is easily
Yeah.
transportable to that setting. And I'm also interested in study commercial setting because I'm interested in reviews, right? And I think that would be the next step, actually. Yeah, fair point.
So one more clarification question here, Dante.
Hi.
So I was wondering, when you say you collect comments from real users, and given that this is from a Facebook page, are these people those who are following this Facebook page already? Because on Facebook, the types of posts you see are highly correlated with what you actually follow. And so are they I guess I'm trying
Good
to
point.
understand, like, to what extent are they like users who would not otherwise engage with this comment, given that you're having a large amount of disagreement in the results, or are they organic
Yeah, yeah.
users?
So no, so these are, sorry, I should have been more clear here, but this is through promotion, so through advertisement, and I'll show you
Mhm.
in a moment. The page that we use, actually, it's here. So we're gonna use a research account that we create. So it's not the same account that you normally use. Okay. So that means that we can actually reach new population easily. And so the users there are, I mean, of course, there might be someone who already knows about the organization, right? But they not necessarily are already, part of the audience, standard audience the organization interact with. Okay. So it's a new set of users, basically. Yeah. So to engage with these, right, to engage with these people, we simply did an organic, sorry, simply did an engagement campaign. Okay, so we just paid for advertisement as brands do, and we target these ads at different zip code groups that were created based on the political election results of 2020. Okay. So here the goal would be we just want to see how engagement levels, right? Even you know it could be totally driven by the algorithm. Okay, that's fair point, but it's embedded within that. How engagement level differs across areas with different Republican vote share, okay, or basically with different political ideologies. So we're going to target ads at blue areas where Republican vote share is below 30%, swing areas which is basically between 45 and 55, so it's in the middle, and red areas where Republican vote share is the majority, is more than 70%. So this is it's an engagement campaign. So the algorithm can really cherry pick impressions. That's okay for us for now. We are not claiming anything beyond that. So we reach about 135,000 people across out of a potential audience of millions, and we, enlisted and collected reactions, comments, as well as some clicks and some sign-ups on a mail list. Okay. So what I want to show
Dante,
now is, yeah,
uh, sort of a thought. So, have you ever looked at heterogeneity in turnouts across these zip codes? So relatively, politically
oh,
active versus less active areas.
we haven't accounted for that.
Okay.
That's also another interesting. Thanks. We did not. So we can because we have the data. So we could look. Yeah. So totally, it can be that turnout is actually very different, and it probably, likely it is. But yeah, we can look. Thanks. So in terms of outcomes, this is the overall setup, but we want to study how both silent type of interactions, you can like a post, but you can also, put a heart or a care, there are different types of reactions. So we want to study how silent reactions, change across political ideologies, both in terms of volume as well as rate. But most importantly, what we want to study is the vocal interactions, so the comments. Okay, so we're going to study the comments in terms of volume and rate per person, but also we're going to study the content of these comments. Okay, so we want to see whether the probability the comments are supportive of the message or opposing of the message, their toxicity level, whether they are more likely to be conservative or not, and so on. And we're going to use an LLMs to classify comments uh, and their content specifically. So here you see just four examples of comments. On the left, you see comments that are more supportive of the organization message. On the right, you see comments that are more opposing of the organization message. Okay. We have a lot of measures that we have developed. Now I think I don't have time to show all of them, but I'll just briefly mention a few. Okay. Okay, so in terms of volume of comments across different areas, so this graph, and let's look at the black lines now, the black bars. We show the total number of comments across blue, swing, and red. Okay, now I'm reporting the total volume, but the same patterns holds if we look at rates. Okay, rates as a percent of people reached in these areas. Okay, also because the population across the three areas is quite balanced in terms of number of people. Okay, and also in terms of rich people. So what we find is that in red areas, right, there are more comments than in blue areas. Okay? And if you look at the green line, the green bar, right, the number of supportive comments, so comments supportive the organization message, they're actually much more stable, okay? Which means that the comments that are opposing to the message of the organization tend to be much more frequent in red areas as opposed to blue areas, okay? This might be, totally not surprising, but we just document that, okay? So that overall comment rate is higher in red areas, and also opposing comment rate is much higher in red areas compared to blue areas, okay? Now, when we look at interactions that are silent, and particularly we look at these reactions like likes, for example, it's a bit of the opposite, okay? So silent interactions are less common in red areas compared to blue areas, okay? So this shows you already that in terms of vocal interactions, these tend to be more likely in red areas where people are, where conservative people are more likely to be, as opposed to blue areas, where for the silent interactions we see in a different pattern, which is the opposite. Yeah, Avner, I see you have a question.
And do you have a sense of how general this pattern is for other campaigns?
So I wouldn't generalize beyond this angle of progressive campaigns, right, pushing a progressive message. But I think, in this case, again, if you think about the population we're trying to reach is 25 million people, right? It's a pretty
No,
big.
I assume you can collect this type of breakdown for many campaigns that were run by others on the
Yeah, so we
platform, right?
have tried. Yeah, good point. So we look at the method library a lot. The problem there is, let me think. I think we started with that with Lena 3 years ago. I forgot what was the limitation. I think the problem was in identifying the location where these campaigns were, right? So the point is we want to look at this, red, blue, swing, and blue, and so sometimes it's not easy to map where if you have
Yeah.
actually.
No, but even just knowing the average is most comments are opposing rather than supportive. Just
Yeah, so that would
to give
mean
us
we should
some,
scrape. Yeah,
yeah.
good point. Yeah, yeah, that's noted. Thanks. So I think another dimension that we can look at is gender. Okay, so that one was so the previous analysis was by location. This is by gender. So what we find in this case is that males are much more likely to comment than females. The opposite is when we look at reactions. So silent form of reactions, males are much less likely to react than females. So females are more likely to engage with the silent form of interactions, while males are more likely to voice out their disagreement with commenting. Okay. Overall, we also find that the conservative stance is much higher in red areas. The negative sentiment is also higher in red areas, and also the offensiveness of the comment is higher in red areas. Informativeness or informative levels are overall small, right? And they're not much, significant difference across area. Okay? We have more in the paper to describe these different comments, but for now, let me just recap what we have, what I've shown you so far. So in this context, right, and again, it's about a progressive cause, right, that is advertised to different areas. What we find is that comments do not mean necessarily endorsement, right? The average comment rate that we have in our data is around 1%, which means, right, a small vocal minority dominates the comment sections of this post. And we, as I showed to you, it's primarily men and people in conservative areas that are more likely to comment. Okay. Now, let me go to the second phase, which I think is more interesting, and I want to have time for that. So what we want to do now is we want to study how these comments, right, and different stances of comments affect on-platform engagement. Yes, I know we have a question, yeah.
Just one quick clarification question. So
Yeah.
on the previous results, when you had supportive or not supportive and informative, could you briefly
Yeah.
comment on how you are, like, what do these constructs mean? How do you measure them?
Yes.
Is this NLP based or something else or survey based?
Sorry, this is we used ChatGPT 4.0 back then, so this was about 1.5 years ago. And we provided the full context. We provided the post itself, and then we provided through the API comments, and we asked to classify them. Some of these are, I think, we asked to classify like in binary or maybe categorical, and then we report them. Now, I think all the details are in the papers, and I think, yeah, but yeah, so it's not through surveys, no. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we have classified the comments, for example, among supportive and opposing, right, through an LLMs. And now what we want to study is, how does these comments, right, whether they are supportive, opposing, or mixed, affects on-platform user engagement for those users who see the comments below this post. Okay, so to study that, we use these previously, generated comments by real users, and we remarket these ads to new sets of zip codes on Facebook. So in this case, we want to nail down the causal effects of comment sections. Okay, so we have to be very careful here on how we build this experiment. So we selected zip code sets for a total audience of 1 million users. And we actually eventually reached 1 million users in these zip codes. Within each zip code group, we conducted an A/B test. Okay, and the A/B test uses meta standard tools, and we have 4 experimental arms. Okay, where we manipulate the comments. Okay, below social media posts and randomize individuals across these different comments sections. Particularly, we'll have a control condition where the post is shown without any comments, a supportive comment condition only, an opposing comment condition only, and a mixed comment condition where you have opposing and supportive comment below the post. Okay. Now, to give you a sense of what users see, this is what I see. So you would see, for example, the main post on top, and then on the left, so A condition would show no comments. The B condition would show only supportive comments. The C condition would show one supportive, one opposing comments, and the decondition would show two opposing comments. Okay, these are just examples. We also rotate different comments. Okay, so what you see here is one potential comment section that users might see. So across these four posts, they only differ in the comment section. Okay, so the only difference is the comment section. And I also want to be clear one thing, that Facebook does not show comments on ads by default. So if you, as a user, right, want to see these two comments below the post, you need to actually expand the post. Okay, so you need to do a click basically and expand this post. Okay. We also try to balance reactions in terms of numbers of reactions. Okay, and also in terms of numbers of shares. So we try to balance whatever is visible on the platform, except for the two comments below this post. Okay. So there are many things we have to deal with in this setting. Okay. One potential confounder comes from spillovers, from new commenters, right? So because people are allowed to comment, then new comments will be visible to other users. And therefore, this would basically break our experimental setup. So to take care of that, what we do is we develop a tool that live filter any new comments that come in. Okay? So this prevents contamination. So basically, these tools, it relies on Meta's tools to moderate content, or comments in this case, which allow brands to hide comments without letting other users know that the comments has been hidden. Okay? So if you comment and someone hide your comments, you don't even know that your comments has been hidden. So we do that to basically make sure that the comments that people see below the post remains, they still belong to opposing, mixed, and supported conditions. Okay. So this should take care of, contamination from other comments. Now, the other concern is divergent delivery. Okay. So, there might be a potential bias due to algorithmic delivery that might show specific content to, specific people for some specific reason, right? And what we try to do is we try to mitigate potential bias from divergent delivery by augmenting best practices that are also documented in recent work by Birch and co-authors. Okay. So this also has people from Meta documenting these. Okay, so we follow 5 pretty common instructions. So in this A/B testing, we split budget equally across arms. All the ads are simultaneously launched with the same duration. There's only one placement, which is Facebook feed only. The optimization in the campaign setup is reach, right? So we want to try to reach as many people as possible. And we also put set a frequency cap at 1 impression per user. Now, we also try to go farther. Okay? As I showed you before, in our context, the ad itself does not change, right? So we also have another, augmenting feature for the A/B test, which is we have identical creatives, okay? And we balance reactions and shares across these creatives, okay? So the creative is identical across the 4 arms. It's only comment section that changes. The 7th point here shows another, a strategy that we try to use to augment A/B testing setup, which is trying to induce audience saturation. Okay, so our potential audience size was 1 million people, and we actually tried to reach 1 million people once per person. Okay, with a frequency cap of one per person. Okay, so altogether, this should really mitigate potential concerns regarding ad delivery. Okay, so regarding algorithmic divergent delivery. And in fact, we do have balance that we show across genders and across ages. Okay, so we don't find, for example, divergence in terms of those 2 dimensions. And we also have some data that points to at least 95% of the audience that we had that was covered by these ads. Okay, so we have really kind of very close to audience saturation in this setting. Okay. Okay, so now in terms of results for the on-platform experiment, right, we want to study what is the effect of the comment section on user engagement, and therefore what I show you is treatment effects that are going to compare users in any comment condition versus the no comment condition that will basically pin down the average treatment effect of the comment section. And then I will show you effects by different stances that will allow us to say something about the effect, the causal effect of specific stances. Okay? I'll show you also heterogeneity by location and gender. Okay? Let's start from a very broad engagement measure that we collect from the platform, which is any action that users might take on the post. Okay? So we call this overall subsequent engagement. So what we find is that having a comment, so having comments below the post, so with respect to the control condition, enhances the subsequent engagement by 13%. So this is the overall average treatment effect. Now, when we dissect by comment stance, we start seeing a ladder, right? So this is a gradient that shows that supportive comments increase engagement by almost 10%. Opposing comments do so by almost 18%. Okay. So it seems already that opposing comments are driving much more than supportive comments in terms of subsequent user engagement. Okay. Now, we can dissect different actions. So engagement is very broad here. So I'm going to dissect by type of engagement. The first thing to look at is something which I think is very cool that we could back out from the Metas metrics, which is a proxy for attention to the comment section. Okay, so we look at clicks to expand the post or the comment section below this post. Okay? So in this case, right, as I said before, right, so the users cannot see what the content of the comment is unless they expand the content, right? Unless they expand the post. So it does actually makes a lot of sense that we see no heterogeneity on this outcome across different stances. And this actually to me is a very strong signal of potential, mitigation of divergent delivery actually in this context. Okay. So it's kind of a placebo. Okay. So we find no difference across stances in the probability that people expand the comment sections. Okay. And this is very much in line with the fact that the content of the comment is already revealed after the user expand the comment section. Okay? But in general, having comments below the post make users more likely to wanting to expand the post and look at the comments. Now we're going to look at the
Dante,
interactions. Yeah,
before you get to the next set of results, quick question from the audience.
yeah.
So the question is that in this setting, the commenters don't get a reply from the poster. And let's say, or the creator of the post, let's say the creator is allowed to reply, would that change things?
Um,
So I guess this is like a non-interactive setting.
Yeah, so the problem of studying that is that would kind of, would break your experimental setup, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
that creates the dynamic setting, which we can study in this context. It would allow you I mean, I think it's super interesting. We were actually discussing to study all the dynamics part,
And
but for that I think you need more structure for that.
yeah, yeah,
Because you need to model, the dynamic component, right?
yeah.
Which we're not doing here. So I can't I don't know actually. I don't have an answer for that. It's
Got it.
another, I think it's a different study, which is interesting. Totally.
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So now we look at interactions. So other comments, other reactions, and and sharing, okay, overall combined. So we find not much effect of having comments on subsequent interactions with a post, but we do find that the opposing comments are the ones that mostly drive future interactions. So future comments, future reactions are basically there, right? increase when you have opposing comments below the post. Okay, this is actually quite huge effect in percent in percent lift, because overall, right, the reaction rate is very small, the interaction rate is small. So, and having opposing comments boosts that by 45%. Now, what the organization really cares about is actually clicks. Okay, so click-through rate on the post to go to the organization's website, and so this would be the traffic to the website, right? So having comments below the post increase subsequent traffic. But I think, again, what is mostly interesting here is that this traffic is only driven by having opposing comments below the post. Okay, so traffic goes up by 15% once you have these opposing comments. Okay, we don't find much effects for supportive comments or mixed comments. So overall, right? Let me skip that. We see that opposing comments are the ones that drive more subsequent engagement on platforms. Okay, and actually, we see something similar when we look at gender and location. Okay, so let me briefly discuss only the location pattern for the sake of time. We see that overall, so this would be the graph on the right, is opposing comments have very large effects, especially in areas that are swing and red, much less in blue areas. Okay, so the probability that people click and go to the website, right, is higher when there are opposing comments below a post, and where these comments are shown to swing and red locations. Okay, so let me wrap up what we have done so far. So we show that comments overall increase attention to the post. Maybe they generate curiosity. Okay, that actually is one story and one mechanism that we develop in the paper. Comments boost engagement, and they actually might reduce advertising costs for advertisers. Okay, and they do so especially when they're opposing to the message of the organization. Okay, so we see that opposing comments increase overall engagement. In particular, interactions increase by 45%, and traffic to the organization website goes up by 15%. And these effects are much more pronounced for men and those that live in less progressive areas. Okay, so more in conservative and mixed areas. Okay. All right. So for the sake of time, actually, maybe let me briefly mention what are the potential mechanisms that might drive these effects. Especially, like, the question we want to answer is, why do opposing comments on progressive posts increase engagement, like clicks on the website to visit the website? As I already mentioned, we think that curiosity is one big driver of this. Okay, so comments draw attention, and therefore users are more likely to read more. But I think at the same time, we have some kind of identity congruent story, that comments are more effective when they're aligned with the user's identity. Okay, so that user's identity, so that kind of alignment with the reader, so with the user's identity, further activate users and motivate engagement. Okay, now let me tell you more about this with the off-platform, study that we have. Okay, so if on the platform these opposing comments generate engagement, what happens when we study off-platform behaviors and attitudes? Okay. So to study that question, we rely on a survey experiment with about 5,000 prolific participants. And these participants were randomly assigned to, again, conditions where we only manipulate the comment sections below social media posts. In this case, the participants could see different topics, one after the other one. But once you are assigned to a control or supportive or opposing condition, the same participant would always see comments of one type. Okay. Again, the rest is the same. We only change the two comments below a post. I think in this case, we could also better control for other features, also the name of the commenter, right? We actually switch. Sometimes we have one male, one female. Actually, we always balance the gender of the commenter. so that users would see one male and one female content. Okay. So we look at different outcomes. The first outcome I just want to show you is basically something that tells us whether comments are attention grabbing, and we actually find so. So if you show social media with comments below the post, then overall time spent viewing the post increases. Okay. And this is irrespective of whether you are showing a supportive comment or an opposing comment. So in this case, I'm showing you treatment effects with respect to the control group, right? So the zero. And this graph tells us that across the 3 posts that each person was assigned to see, having comments increases the time spent on this post by overall approximately 25 to 28 seconds. Okay. So this tells us that people, spend some time looking at these comments. Now, the first outcome that we want to look at is racial attitudes. And to study racial attitudes, we combine a set of indices. We create an index with different items that belong to the same set of variables that tell us something about whether users might move to be more likely to be progressive attitudes versus conservative attitudes. Okay? Now, on the top of this graph, we show the effects for having supportive comments below the post versus the control group with no comments, while the bottom part, so the red part, shows you the opposing comments effects versus control group of no comments. Okay, so if we look at the overall index, we see that opposing comments, they move attitudes to be less progressive. Okay, so negative part means less progressive. And we see that these effects are mostly driven by a huge effect, a negative effect on NGO favorability. Okay, so the attitudes towards the organization declines. The perceived importance of the issues that the organization speak about also decline. And also the intentions of users to engage in cross-partisan interactions, so especially with conservative users, decline. Okay? So we see these effects that are actually strong and significant for the opposing comments. We don't see much effects for supportive comments. Okay, not even like a symmetric effect on the other side. So overall, opposing comments decrease attitudes, okay, both towards the organization, towards the topics of the organization, and towards other people's intentions to engage with other people. Then we look at incentivized donations. Okay, so we ask people how much they would donate out of the budget that they could get. And what we find is that it's the opposing comments that mostly reduce the probability that people would donate, as well as the amount that are willing to donate. And the effects are between 7% for the extensive margin, so the donation probability, to, if I remember correctly, is a 10% decline in the amount that they are willing to donate. Okay, so probability to donate declines when people are exposed to opposing comments as opposed to no comments. We don't find a significant effect for the supportive comments condition, and also we don't find any effect on willingness to sign up for the newsletter of the organization. Okay. If we look at donations by party affiliation, which I think is interesting, right? So studying heterogeneity by the party affiliation in this context matter a lot. We actually find that the donation probability, it declines for both Democrats and Republicans. Okay? So it's not that only Republicans are less likely to donate, but actually it's also the Democrat ones that are less likely to donate when they see opposing comments. Okay? So for Democrats, it goes down by 7% with respect to control mean, and for Republicans, it goes down by 12% with respect to control mean. Okay? And again, this is only driven by the 2 comments that we seed below the post. Now, we also ask people to report perceptions of what is accepted, right? The social norm. Okay. So we ask people, what percent of survey participants do you think agree with a progressive statement? And what we find, which is consistent with the social norm story, especially behind the donation shift for Democrats, is that Democrats are now, right, less likely to see that other people support progressive views. Okay, so the negative effect here on the Democrats tells us that opposing comments decrease the the perceived prevalence of progressive views for Democrats only. Okay, they don't, they not much for Republicans, independent, and nothing for supportive comments. Okay? So this kind of supportive of the social norm story, right? So people, especially Democrats, now think that less people are supportive of the progressive views, and they might actually think of, they might want to align with that story, right? They might want to conform to that norm, and therefore might be less likely to donate. At the same time, we also try to look at emotional response. So we ask people whether the comments make them feel angry or annoyed. And again, I think here what is interesting is to look at the effects across Democrats and Republicans, right? Because we see basically a very, divergent effects. So these effects for Democrats tells us that having opposing comments below the pause, as opposed to having supportive comments, make people much more likely to say that they feel angry and annoyed by these comments. Okay. The opposite happens for Republicans. Okay. So the Republicans are actually more annoyed and angry when they see supportive comments. Okay. So this effect here is negative, meaning that they're more likely to like or maybe they prefer opposing comments. Okay. So this tells us what? That basically having counter-attitudinal comments, right? It does create some kind of anger and annoyance, right? And therefore, identity congruence matters, right? So that users, when they see comments that they are in conflict with what they believe, they're more likely to disengage. They don't want to see that, okay? So they want to run away from that, which can also be part of the story of why, we see that Democrats are less likely to donate.
Sorry, but
Yeah.
Dante, there are two channels of engagement here, right? So you
Yeah,
started by
sorry, this
showing
is
us,
downstream engagement.
yeah.
Downstream engagement. Yeah.
No, but I mean, the common wisdom is that making us angry will make us engage more on social media, right? And so it's also consistent with that, given the on-platform engagement, right?
Yes. Yeah, totally. Um, so I think in this context, what we were actually also interested in studying is whether, once you're more, if you're more hungry, right, does that create what we call sorry, I want to say like reactionary defense, right? So if now you have someone who attacks your beliefs, are you more likely to, to support or to defend your cause? And we don't find effects off the platform for that. Okay, maybe on platform something might happen, right? But this is not consistent with what we find off the platform. For example, for donations. Okay. And again, like what happens on the platform is sometimes driven by those few people, right? And in the tail are normally in the tail of the distribution. What happens off the platform might not be driven by that, right? These can be like more maybe middle, moderate people, or not necessarily those who are most likely vocal on the platform. Okay, but yeah, so that's a good point. Thanks. So let me wrap up. First of all, right, the descriptive evidence part just shows that, if you just do these campaigns, even if you optimize for engagement, you're going to get very opposing voices, right? 1% comment rate means that you have a vocal minority of people, right? And these view commenting, and that these views that are, in the comments, they are also very opposing of the organization's message. Now, once we take these comments and we run a field experiment for that, we find that the presence and sense of comments has causal effect on on-platform engagement. And in particular, it's the opposing comments that further increase disengagement on the platform. Okay, they do increase clicks and interactions on this type of post. Now, we find the opposite when we go off the platform. Okay, so these opposing comments might actually have negative brand safety effects on for brands. Okay, because they shift attitudes, reduce donations to these progressive causes. Okay. So we also try to do a cost benefit analysis, right? Because having comments that boost engagement means that the potential cost per advertisement goes down, right? So there's a clear trade-off, right? So what is your willingness to tolerate negative comments, right? Because on the one hand, you're going to have campaigns that are more cost effective in terms of on-platform metrics, but they are actually more costly once you go out of the platform, off the platform. Okay. And so we actually have some cost benefit analysis in the paper that shows that in the end, the net benefit of tolerating these opposing comments will depend on the type of traffic and the quality of traffic that that comes from the on-platform engagement. Okay. And we can test whether the new traffic, the incoming traffic that comes because of the opposing comments is actually of high quality, right? High probability of conversion versus not. So we don't have a direct test for that. And so we just have a simple model that shows different, if you manipulate the quality of this traffic, how does the overall net benefit of opposing comments change? Okay. More broadly, we have some methodological contribution here, which is a novel framework to run experiments on social media that allows us to test explicitly how user-generated content in the form of comments, right, affects on platforms behaviors. Okay? And the implications of our findings, right, go a little bit beyond of just these cost benefit analysis, right? They show that vocal few can shape behavior of many, for example, but this doesn't mean that we should remove content. It means that we should probably think of comment moderation more deeply, right? Because moderation will involve these trade-offs, right? The trade-off is pretty clear, that brand safety versus user engagement on the platform. Okay. And more broadly, if we think about platform incentives like Meta, right, the question is, do they have an incentive to reduce opposing comments? Or sometimes, right, do they have an incentive to reduce, comments that are toxic, comments that are, too offensive, maybe? And I think, our context says that there might not be such an incentive for the platforms, because in the end, what the platform cares is online engagement, and opposing comments lead to more engagement. Okay? So there is a trade-off there as well. And with that, I'm concluding. That's the link to the paper. Any comments can also be opposing. Please feel free to share.